I want to welcome you to another video Drasha. This week's Torah portion is Beshalach, and we have finally come to the great event, the Exodus from Egypt and the crossing of the sea. And right after the crossing of the sea, after the Jewish people reach the other side and the Egyptians come through and they're, of course, killed in the sea, we find in the Torah a lengthy poem or song. It's interesting that the word in Hebrew for poem and song are the same word, shirah. And we call this the Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea. This is the song that we sang in praise of God for saving us, for bringing us through, for creating this miracle for us, and for destroying our enemies. And of course, this song or poem, not only do we find it in the Torah, in this Torah portion, but the fact is that it has become part of our daily liturgy. The Song of the Sea, we say it every morning as part of the morning service. And then, perhaps the most famous phrase from this song, the Mi Chamocha, who is like you, O Lord, among the heavenly powers, who is like you, magnificent in holiness. Those words become part of the liturgy that we say right after the Shema. So if you look in the paragraphs that come immediately after the Shema, you will find these words, Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Hashem, Mi Kamocha Ne'edar Ba'kodesh. So we see how this song has a significant place in the Torah, but even more importantly, has a significant place in our daily liturgy. And yet this raises a certain problem. I'd say there's a conundrum here, because there is a midrash, and it's a midrash that is often quoted, that when the Jews crossed the sea, the angels wanted to sing a song of praise to God, and God rebukes them and says, "How can you sing a song while my creatures are dying?" So the conundrum here is, if the angels were rebuked and were prevented from singing a song, why is it that the Israelites, we did sing a song? The song is preserved in the Torah, and indeed, as I've pointed out already, the elements of this song are actually incorporated into our daily liturgy. What's the difference? What's the difference between our singing this song and the angels who wanted to sing a song? So I heard an explanation once for this. It's really the only good explanation I've ever heard. And it is that the difference between the angels and human beings is that angels can only do one thing at a time. You know, the word for angel in Hebrew, malach, really means a messenger. And an angel is a messenger who is sent to do one specific thing. As an example, you might remember the story where there are the three visitors who come to Abraham. This is the famous story where Abraham provides them with hospitality. And eventually we find out that these three visitors were angels. So why were there three of them? Well, because one of them was sent to do the mitzvah of Bikor Cholim, of visiting the sick, because Abraham was still suffering from having just circumcised himself. One of them was sent to predict the birth of Isaac in a year's time, and the third one was sent to give a warning to Sodom, to Sodom. So each one of these three angels had a task to do, and that's all that they could do. Why otherwise? Why not just send one angel? Let him take care of all three things as long as he's there. But you see, that's the way it works with angels. And so the fact is that just as an angel can only do one thing, I think also we could say that an angel can only have one thought, can only have one emotion at any given time. And so the problem is, if the angels would have sung a song of praise to God at the crossing of the sea, all they could express would be their joy, their happiness, their exaltation over the victory of the Jews and the defeat of the Egyptians. Whereas human beings are capable of having more than one thought in their minds at a time, we're capable of having more than one emotion at the same time. And therefore, we can certainly be happy about a victory that we've had. We can be happy that we were saved, that our enemies were defeated, and at the same time have a certain remorse. We can have a certain sense of regret that others suffered as a consequence of their own actions. They were responsible, there's no question, but we can still have that sense of remorse, that sense of regret. And that's why it was acceptable for the Jewish people to sing a song of praise to God, but for the angels, no, they were told not to. Because we can harbor these two feelings at the same time. You know, it reminds me of something that I heard many years ago. You know, Golda Meir was famous for many of her one-liners, her quips that were so incisive. And I remember it was reported that she once said, "I can forgive the Arabs for killing our children. I can't forgive them for making us kill their children." You know, that is precisely the thought that we're getting to here. And that is, look, we have to defend ourselves. Judaism is not a pacifist tradition. Self-defense is not only permitted, it is really required. The Torah says if someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. This idea that we have an obligation to protect ourselves, to preserve our lives, even if it means killing someone else. Self-defense is a requirement. War is certainly spoken about in the Torah. There are laws, there are mitzvahs that are given in connection with war, which means, yes, there are going to be times you're going to have to fight a war, but you know what? There are rules and regulations, just like there are for every other aspect of life. And of course, many of the great figures in the Bible, King David, King Saul, were warriors. So Judaism is not a pacifist tradition. We recognize that war is sometimes necessitated. But that doesn't mean that we have to rejoice over the death of our enemies. We can rejoice over our victory. We can rejoice at the fact that we were saved, that we were able to defend ourselves, to defeat our enemies, and to be able to continue to survive. But you know, the idea of dancing on the grave of your enemy, that is counter to the Jewish spirit. And so I think that is the point that is made in here, and that is the angels could only have had the one emotion, only the happiness at the defeat of the Egyptians at the crossing of the sea. But for the Jewish people, we were capable of celebrating, of praising God for our victory, for our salvation, but also at the same time have a certain sense that, yes, others did suffer as a consequence of this. Of course, we see this same thing at the Passover Seder. You know, why do we take out a drop of wine at the mention of each of the plagues? Well, the same explanation is given there, because wine is a symbol of joy. And yes, we are celebrating at the Seder. We are celebrating our redemption from Egypt, but we reduce our joy just a little bit because we remember others did suffer as a consequence of this. The other thing that this explains is that on Passover, just like on all the festivals, we say Hallel. As a matter of fact, we say the Hallel at the Passover Seder itself. But on the seventh day of Passover, we say only the half Hallel. Now, as everybody likes to comment, of course, half Hallel is really not half, it's more like 85%. But the fact of the matter is, it is an abbreviated form of the Hallel. And so on the seventh day of Passover, we say the half Hallel. Why? Because the seventh day of Passover commemorates the crossing of the sea. And so it's precisely this same explanation. We reduce our rejoicing somewhat because we recognize that the Egyptians suffered at the same time that we were redeemed. So this idea, I think, is an important one, that we should recognize that, yes, Judaism certainly recognizes self-defense as an important aspect of the human condition. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to fight to defend ourselves. But on the other hand, we remain cognizant of the consequences of war. And that's why some of the greatest expressions of a desire for peace are found in the Jewish tradition. After all, it's the prophet Isaiah who says, Lo yisa goy el goy cherev. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And the same prophet Isaiah, who, looking forward to a messianic future, tells us that it will be a time when the lion will lie down with the lamb. And so, yes, we do have a tradition of an aspiration for peace and a desire for peace, but also a recognition that sometimes we have to engage in war. But when we do so, we have to do so with the restrictions in mind that are part of the moral, the ethical conduct of a war, and that we don't celebrate the death of our enemies. We understand it as a necessary and unfortunate consequence of any situation of combat. So with those thoughts in mind, you can perhaps have a look at the Torah portion this week, and I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos.